I'll start with a little tune. Uh, we'll come on to the nursery rhyme probably at the end. Um, there is a long history of bridges in London, and London Bridge in particular. So we're going to be going back about 2,000 years, covering the most famous of the bridges, which we can see there in front of us, the medieval bridge, a town in itself, maybe 500 people living on it in its peak, 140 shops and houses, 5 stories, some of them crossing the bridge. And this stone bridge survived for 600 years or more. But we'll also look at some of the earlier iterations and the more modern ones. And we will start, in fact, with the modern one. This is the most recent iteration of a nearly a 2,000-year-old legacy. This one opened by the Queen in 1973, and it's the work of engineers Moss, Hay and Anderson, with input by the post-war modernist, brutalist architect and planner William Holford. It's made of 4 huge concrete and steel box beams. So imagine great, long, thin boxes of concrete and steel. And even though it's bigger in all dimensions than the one it replaced, John Rennie's 1830 bridge, it weighs considerably less. The modern bridge, as you can see, has got 2 piers, so 3 spans. Rennie's bridge had 5 spans on it. The central span of this one, 100 meters wide, about 5-6 times wider than Rennie's. A maximum height of 9 meters, 30 feet beneath the central arch. It's about 3/4 wider than its predecessor, and it's nicely finished. It's got granite from Devon on the balustrades and some nice stainless steel handrails, and the footways have got York stone paving slabs and granite curbs. So all lovely stuff. But I think the best that we can probably say about it is that it's sort of inoffensive. It's utilitarian. It is really a little bit bland. It's sort of striving for that elegance, that simplicity of Giles Gilbert Scott's Waterloo Bridge, just up the river, but not quite hitting its mark. If it had been a road bridge that's taking a dual carriageway over the Tees or the Trent or the Taff, we wouldn't worry about it. We wouldn't pass the time. We would drive over it in 30 seconds and that would be it. But this is London Bridge, the most famous bridge in the world, probably, possibly. It's the heir to a river crossing that takes us back to at least the Romans. And as such, this one is a little bit disappointing. It's the reason, I suppose, why half of the Americans who come to London think that Tower Bridge is London Bridge. Something that famous with that much history has to be somehow dramatic. This is just a bridge. So we'll come back to this towards the end. We'll look at the histories of the bridge. We'll look at who made them, how they functioned, what went wrong with them, war, battles on them, jousts, conflicts, invasions, rebellions, all that stuff of history. And then come back to this one at the end. And we'll finish up with a sort of coda about that nursery rhyme, London Bridge is falling down, which has got half a dozen different ascribed sources to it, and we'll try and nail some of those down as we get further on. It's probably going to be slightly longer talk than usual, so it's going to be over an hour. Generally, I aim for an hour. Works out to be about an hour and 10 minutes. Probably another 5 or 10 minutes on top of that. I should get my watch off so I can actually see what the time is, so that I don't impose on you for far too long. Because there is so much history, there is so much that is crammed into it. I mean, it starts with the Romans. London always starts with the Romans. This isn't London Bridge, this is Sir John Stone's imagining of one of Caesar's bridges across the Rhine. So this dates to about 50 BCE. It Caesar built a couple of substantial bridges across the Rhine as part of his campaign to conquer Gaul. And these crossed rivers maybe as long, or maybe as wide rather, as London Bridge, certainly as deep, possibly 9 meters deep, and they were built quickly, days, the records tell us, and they're pretty substantial. You could get legions to march across them. And it's this sort of engineering that it comes to play in London. So after the Claudian invasion, after the defeat of the tribes in southeast England, a bridge is constructed across the Thames. We think the first bridge was there by the year 50, may have been there by the year 45. We don't know what this first bridge was like. May even have been a sort of rough sort of pontoon bridge, so it's simply to carry people across. Probably destroyed in the Boudiccan revolt of AD 60. We know then that there was another bridge that survived to the 80s or the 90s, another one that was built around about 85, 90. That was replaced in AD 120 by a much more substantial structure, great oak piles sunk into the river, stone piers, a wooden surface that could be replaced when it got damaged. There's speculation that there was a drawbridge in the middle of it because there were wharves, what we would call upstream of the river. And as one historian put it, London is a parasite on the bridge. London grew up almost because of the bridge's existence. The Roman road network leads to London. What you can see in this artist's imagining as well is that this is the city side over here on the right. The river was much wider over on the south bank, where modern day Southwark is. That was a Roman settlement, another part of Roman Londinium, crossed with rivers. The south much marshier, much lower. Routes through it have to be picked through. The river was wider, slower moving, flooded more. There is evidence that this final Roman bridge is not being used as much by the end of the 4th century. Londinium itself had gone into a huge decline by this point as the Roman Empire contracts, as trouble brews in Europe, on the continent, as Saxon pirates raid the coast and raid into London. The wharves, the harbours of Roman London aren't being used. And what seems to be happening is in some of the big approach roads to the bridge, they're being dug up. The gravel is being extracted, which means the roads aren't capable of getting the heavy use that they were before. So the traffic, the transport, the carts aren't passing over that bridge. We don't know how long that bridge survived after the collapse of the Roman Empire, after the around about 407, when the Roman legions have finally been withdrawn and Roman Londinium decays pretty rapidly after that, but that bridge may have survived a little bit longer. Just before we get onto what then happens, because we've got a gap of 500-600 years perhaps when there wasn't a bridge, I'm just going to go a little bit upriver. I've been talking about the Roman bridge as the first London bridge. There may be one that was a bit earlier, say a bit earlier, 1,000 years or so. This is from about 3,500 years ago. That's Vauxhall Bridge that you can see up there, MI6 just tucked in there, and these little wooden posts that are revealed at low tide, and you can still go and see them, have been dated to about 3,500 years ago. Time Team, the Channel 4 archaeology program, did an excavation of them in 2001. They speculated that it was some sort of bridge over to one of the islands that at that point existed in the middle of the Thames there. Whether that continued over to the other side of the river, i.e. a bridge across the whole of the Thames, we don't know. Whether there was actually a bridge, we don't know. It might have been a wharf, it might have been a jetty of some sort. But we do know that the late Bronze Age, this is when this dates to, and then later the Iron Age, votive offerings were made into rivers. It may have had some religious or sacred connotation for the people there. This did not develop into a London bridge, which we're going to discuss, nor did whatever settlement that was around here develop into any sort of town. But those of you who want to go and stroll down Vauxhall Embankment at low tide, you can still see it. And actually on the other side of the bridge, at the what is it, the neap tides, the very lowest tides of the year, you can see a couple of posts going into the river that are another couple of 1,000 years older than this, which no one knows the purpose of. Again, wharf, jetty, communication into the river, we don't know. But back to the main drag. The Romans leave, the Saxons arrive. They don't seem to have had a bridge, as far as we know. The first Saxon settlements further downriver, down close to modern day Covent Garden. That one on there is the Royal Opera House, where when they were redoing that 10-15 years ago, there were some excavations done, and part of the Saxon street pattern was found under there. This is known as London Wick or London Witch, which is a market town. The Saxon traders seem to have come down the river, moored up, and as the tide sinks, the boats become their shops, their places for trade there on the river. They're not sailing past any bridge. There is no need for a bridge at this point. And we know that this area was inhabited for a good 250, 300 years until Alfred the Great, and he moves the population back within the old confines of Londinium, builds up the wall. It's the time of the Viking raids, the men from the north coming down. London was attacked in 842, again in 851. We know that the Vikings overcamped for the winter in what was within the old Roman walls in 871. Alfred moves the population from London Wick into London Burg, a fortified town in 886. England is then divided between the Anglo-Saxon bit, the Danelaw, the stuff controlled by the Vikings, and that border. It's the River Lee, so it's not that far away. London is a border town. We don't know if Alfred built a bridge. Probably not. It probably would have been recorded. There is also a hithe or a wharf upriver of where the current bridge is. And that would have been a difficult place to trade if a bridge is blocking that transport up and down the river. The first mention we have of a London bridge that comes from Anglo-Saxon records is in the 970s, but it's probably wrong. There is the tale of a widow and her son who are tried and condemned for having made effigies of someone that they were in conflict with, and essentially sticking pins in that. And the widow is the son escapes. The widow is condemned to death, and the records say that she was thrown from London Bridge. Most modern interpretations of that is that this was a bridge that was on a road to London, because this all took place about 80 miles north of London, well into Cambridgeshire. And it seems unlikely that she would have been brought down to London just to be executed. And like most witch trials, this was all about property anyways. Someone wanted the land she had, the rich landowner wanted the land she had. They cooked up this tale of witchcraft, and she lost out because of it. So some books you read say that there is a mention of a London Bridge in the 1970s, 970s, 980s, but this seems to be a sort of false record. The Vikings, again, do start to figure in our stories of the bridge. In 994, Svein Forkbeard, king of the Danes, and Olaf what is it? I've written it down. Tryggvason, King Olaf the First of Norway, attack London. They are beaten back. It is speculated that they've landed on the south, or they're coming from the south, and are trying to cross the bridge. They can't get the bridge, and that is one of the reasons why their attack fails. There have been timbers found of this Saxon bridge, which are dated between 982 and 1032. So it sort of worked. There is a bridge there certainly by the year 1000. We don't know whether it had been there 20 years, whether it's not built for another 10 years, but by about the year 1000, there is a bridge. And then we have an unbroken history of bridges at London Bridge right up to the present. I say unbroken, some of those bridges did break, but there has always been a structure there regarded as being London Bridge. It next sort of figures in the turn of that century, the early 1000s, when the king is Ethelred the Unready. The Danes are being assertive. First Svein again, Svein Forkbeard, then his son Canute, Canute the Great. London falls to the Danes in 1013. Svein Forkbeard occupies the city, and this is when we get the first, or one of the more famous stories about the bridge, which comes from an Icelandic sort of bardic poet called Snorri Sturluson, called Heimskringla. This is actually written 200 years after the event, so we have to take it with a large pinch of salt. But after Svein Forkbeard has taken the city, Ethelred the Unready allies with the new king of Norway. He's also called Olaf Haraldsson, Olaf II, and they attack London. The Danes have got a fort in Southwark. They have a fort on the north bank of the river, close to where the Tower of London is. There is a fortified bridge. The Anglo-Norwegian army cannot get upriver. They cannot get past it. As this illustration shows, it is packed full of armed men. And the saga says that King Olaf covered his boats with these thatched with these roofs to protect them from the arrows and rocks that were flung on them from the defenders of the bridge. They row up to the bridge, attach huge cables or chains around the post, and then using the tide and rowing like hell, they bring down the bridge. The bridge is collapsed. Southwark is disconnected from the North Bank. The English and the Danes take Southwark. The North Bank then surrenders, and Ethelred the Unready reclaims London again. Later on, the bridge is rebuilt. It seems to be rebuilt very quickly because Canute sails. Canute sails up in 1014. Can't get past the bridge, and digs a huge ditch that goes all the way around it. Canute's ditch. It's meant to be sort of 4 kilometers long, going from Rotherhithe all the way through round to beyond Westminster. Brings his longboats round there and takes, or attempts to take, the city. Probably neither of these stories are true, but as I say, Sturluson is writing at least 200 years after King Olaf, but there is something happening around the bridge for these stories to continue to be perpetuated. St. Olaf, by the way, going to the City of London, there are half a dozen St. Olaf churches. He was knighted, canonized. He Christianized Norway and is Norway's patron saint. And Tooley Street, south of the river, is a corruption of St. Olaf, because that is where Olaf and his forces landed to eject the Danes at that point. There is a bridge, though, in the early part of the last millennium. We also know that it is, we also believe that it is this that stops William the Conqueror taking London straight after the Battle of Hastings. After he's defeated Harold at Hastings, the English forces retreat, regroup in London. William's forces are reinforced. They march on the capital. There is a battle, the Battle of Southwark, where the English are defeated and retreat, but William can't get across the river. So that implies another fortified bridge, another defense that stops these attacking forces getting across. This bottleneck of troops makes it very easy to defend. So William burns Southwark, burns the southeast, swings west, destroying the countryside as he goes, and eventually London surrenders to him towards the end of 1066. William rebuilds the bridge, and more work is done by William's son, William II, William Rufus. We know that that bridge is then destroyed in 1091 by what is a tornado. It is a huge storm, the like of which London had never seen and has never seen again. Some meteorologists basing it on pretty scant information, I have to say, speculate that the winds might have got to over 200 miles an hour blowing through London. There are 600 houses destroyed. The bridge is destroyed. St. Mary le Bow in Cheapside is blown down, and it is said that 26-foot long beams are thrust into the ground by the force of the storm, to such a degree that only 4 feet of them appears above the earth. The bridge is rebuilt again, and there is then a great fire of London in 1135 breaks out near the London Stone, near modern-day Cannon Street, burns all the way up down to the River Fleet, but also destroys the bridge, rebuilt yet again. And then we get to the hero of the story, I suppose, Peter, who is the priest of St. Mary Colechurch, which is number 6, just there, St. Mary Colechurch, just on the corner of Cheapside and Poultry, rather, in the City of London. Because he's the priest of St. Mary Colechurch, he's come down to us in history as Peter de Colechurch. He is the one who builds the last wooden bridge. That goes up in 1163, constructed of elm. And then a dozen or so years later, he starts work on the stone bridge. So 1176, reign of Henry II, he is starting work on the stone bridge. And it is this stone bridge that takes 33 years to build. Peter dies 4 or 5 years before its completion. But this stone bridge lasts in one form or another for the next 600 years until Rennie rebuilds it. The construction methods, they are sinking huge piles into the river. These manually operated pile drivers, sticking these great wooden stakes in. You then fill those up. That gives you, they're known as, in these towns, starlings. And above those, you build the piers on which stand the bridges. There are 19 of these starlings and these piers, 20 arches. They're not regular, they're not building them at regular intervals, they're building them where they can, where the ground seems to be able to take that. It is a huge challenge to do this, of course, because as you build one, you've narrowed the river slightly, the flow of the rest is increased, and the more you build, the more that flow is increased. So it is a difficult job. It is a challenging job, which is probably the reason it takes 33 years to build it. But once built, it is regarded as one of the wonders of Europe. It is about 1,000 feet long. It has got a drawbridge in the center, a stone gate at one end. The houses, probably, this is obviously not a contemporary illustration. It comes from this book about the houses on the bridge. The building, probably not this regular. They are slightly more chaotic in their build. The bridge is about 1,000 feet long. Width, I think it's just over 20 feet, but with the houses perched on the sides of it, the roadway in the middle can be as narrow as 12 feet in some points. So that's under 4 meters. So it is very narrow indeed. The houses are built 2 or 3 feet on the stone parapet, and then there are supports that sort of cantilever out where the bulk of the house resides. A big chapel in the middle. The one of the central piers is bigger than the others, as is the drawbridge pier, and it is a chapel dedicated to Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury, murdered in 1173 on the orders of Henry II. The financing of it comes from a tax on wool, on a tax on leather, on a tax on cloth. It was said that London Bridge is built on wool packs because the woolen trade was so valuable to England, and the tax on that generated the funds that allowed it to be built. It was always going to be an occupied bridge. Houses were included from the start. These are not just residences, they are places of trade, the ground floor, a shop or a workshop, a tiny little ledge where the trader could display their wares. The rents from this went towards the cost of the upkeep, the maintenance of the bridge. It is narrowing the flow of the river. So you can see here at low tide, the arches very constricted by these starlings. These are these platforms on which the piers are built. At low tide, the river is maybe being squeezed into a third or a quarter of the space it would have occupied normally. At high tide, at best a half. So you are setting up all sorts of consequences that I'll come to in a minute. Almost immediately after this is completed in 1209, there is the Great Fire of Southwark. That breaks out in 1212. So Southwark is the south side of the bridge, the other side to the city. Hugely destructive fire. Hundreds of houses burning, people trying to escape one way over the bridge, other people coming the other way either to help or to watch, a strong wind blowing from the south, and what happens is some of those sparks carry down to the city end of the bridge. That catches fire, the houses burn, people are trapped on the bridge. Some are killed in the flames, some manage to get into boats and escape, others overload the boats and the boats sink. John Stowe, writing in 400 years later, said that 3,000 people were killed as a result of the fire. It almost certainly wasn't that many, but probably several hundreds were killed. And the bridge itself, very badly damaged, almost cleared of houses, the chapel destroyed. This is one of the first of the many rebuildings that take place because of fires, because of accidents, because of general wear and tear that happens to London Bridge. The first illustration we have of it dates from about 1500, looks back to the 1430s of Charles, the Duke of Orleans, captured at Agincourt and kept prisoner in the Tower of London. And you can see the bridge here at the back. There is the chapel, the rebuilt chapel, rebuilt in the late 1300s. And just a little close up for you. You can also see a version of this, which I hope this works. I shall click through within the Church of St. Magnus the Martyr, which is the church at the, can people see that? Can you see that little bridge? The Church of St. Magnus the Martyr, which is at the north end of the bridge. In fact, in the Middle Ages, you stepped out of the church and you were on the roadway that led into the bridge. The church itself, the bridge itself, most of that was within the parish of St. Magnus. Within that, there is this rather wonderful scale model of the bridge, designed or made as it would have looked in about 1400. It's commemorating Henry V's procession over the bridge, and it has got about 900 different figures on it, made by someone called David Agate in 1987. And if you are in London and you go to St. Magnus, you can see this. Oops, gone the wrong way there. And you can see here the spans of the river. The great drawbridge tower. There is a drawbridge, obviously lifting up so that boats with masts could sail sort of gingerly through. At this end, what's called the stone gate, that was another layer of protection. The borders of the City of London began just on the Southwark side of that. 1282, it was decreed that the bridge was part of the City of London, not the responsibility and no claim on it by the county of Surrey or the borough of Southwark on the other side. You get a sense as well, this is great, love this, but I'm of the narrowness of that bridge. This is the only bridge across the tidal Thames until Putney Bridge is built in 1729. This is where, if you're coming up from the southeast of England, you either have to make a huge long detour, you have to find somewhere to ford, or you have to go over London Bridge. And you just imagine the chaos, the carts, the people. Here, sheep, presumed sheep, are being herded over the bridge. This is happening constantly, things going backwards and forwards. It could take an hour to cross the bridge. All the while, you have got people shouting out their wares, people trying to sell you things, people trying to rob you. It is a chaotic scene. The other fascinating thing about it is that lots of it was covered. So much of it was dark. And sometimes people were on the bridge without realizing it. They thought they were just in some other London street until they walked along, and then there's a gap through the houses and they could see the rushing water on either side. And the problems with going through the bridge, the narrowness of this space, because this is blocking half at least of the river flow, it's acting like a dam. At high tide, there could be as much as a 6-foot drop between one side of the bridge and the other. Incredibly dangerous. Hundreds of people, if not thousands, lost their life trying to shoot the bridge. People generally, particularly the nobility, particularly people who were traveling upriver, would get off their boat at one side, allow the boatman to take it through, and then rejoin it on the other side. One of the other dangers for the boatman, all of this overhang, quite frequently this is where the latrines were in houses, so you not have to be careful of what's underneath you. You have to be very aware of what's above you. There were also public latrines based on the bridge, one of which collapsed in 1381. 5 men were killed as it plunged into the waters beneath. Let's see if I can get back to this. Here we go. And this in Norden's illustration of the bridge in 1597. He has even drawn in one of those boats sinking or being overturned as it has attempted to shoot the rapids. This also causes problems for the bridge itself, not just the people going through them. There is someone else trying to get through, just squeezing through. This narrowness, this increased flow going through it, meant that these starlings needed constant repair, and also the piers on which they were built at high tide, they're going to be affected by the movement of the water as well as the tide flows in and out. It's a very narrow gap. Boats are hitting them. People would be fishing close to them. At one point, fishermen were not allowed to have fishing boats within 20 fathoms. That's what, 160 feet, 50 meters. They weren't allowed to fish within 50 meters of the bridge because of damage had been done by the fishing boats. There is the drawbridge again. We'll come to the heads, which are on this big stone gatehouse at one side. By the time Norden's doing this, the drawbridge tower that had existed had been replaced. We get something called Nonsuch House. Look at that shortly. And the chapel has gone in the Reformation. This has now been converted to a general residence. But that chapel, that Becket Chapel, the biggest building on the whole bridge, by the time it was finished and enlarged in the 1380s, is about 60 feet long, so just under 20 meters, 40 feet high. It's over a couple of layers. There's an undercroft. There's access to it from the river. The undercroft was sometimes called the boatman's chapel, because you could step onto the Starling upper flight of stairs and go into that undercroft. It's in that undercroft as well that Peter de Culchurch, who'd started the bridge, where his body was buried. It's on the biggest pier in the bridge. It is where pilgrimages to Canterbury started. So if you were one of Chaucer's pilgrims, you would have gone and prayed in the Becket Chapel on the bridge. Becket at this point, certainly the patron saint of London, if not the patron saint of England. Then you would have started your pilgrimage the next morning from one of the inns on the Southwark side. And as well, the Pope decreed at one point that if you went and prayed in the Becket Chapel on Becket's birthday, 29th of December, you were given 30 days of indulgences, so 30 days of purgatory by visiting the chapel on Becket's birthday. It doesn't survive the Reformation. Henry VIII has got a very big downer on the cult of Becket. It's converted to worship Thomas the Apostle, doubting Thomas, in 1538. All the images of Becket are taken away from it, and 10 years later, 1548, it's deconsecrated. By 1553, it's occupied by a grocer. He's using the undercroft as his storeroom and doing his trade from the main part of the building. So this place this bridge is part of London's life, part of the fabric of it, the only bridge across the city, a place of wonder for visitors who've never seen anything like it. It is the largest inhabited bridge in the world. It is the biggest stone bridge in the world. It is regarded as being one of the wonders of medieval Europe. It's an entrance into the city. It is a defense. That's why the drawbridge is there. That's why the Great Stone Gate is there. It becomes part of the warp and weft of medieval London life. It is as much a high street for London as Cheapside is, or say Whitehall or Pall Mall is now. So all sorts of different events and processions take place on the bridge. One of my favorite takes place in 1390, a joust between the champion of England called De Wells and the Scottish champion De Lindsay. He and his entourage are given passes to be able to come down to England. It is meant to be a fight to the death. There are banners across the bridge. All the properties that are there are rented out. The nobility take all the best views. Boats moor in the river so that people can try and see up to where it is. We think the joust probably took place in the open space in front of the chapel. Even though it's meant to be a fight to the death, it is a challenge between England and Scotland. And De Lindsay, the Scottish champion, unseats De Wells. There is then fighting on the foot, and De Lindsay doesn't administer the coup de grace. He is proclaimed the champion. De Wells is stretchered off the field and recovers, but the Scottish champion is given the honours is given riches, and he and Dwell's form a friendship because of their combat together. It also features in battles. There is another Battle of Southwark. I mentioned William the Conqueror before. In 1381, in the Peasants' Revolt, that drawbridge is lifted. Those gates are locked to stop the men of Kent coming into the city. But because the men of Essex have also revolted, they've gone in through Aldwych. The bridge is lowered, and the rebellious peasants then stream across. A couple of generations later, during the reign of Henry VI, during the Wars of the Roses, we have Jack Cade's rebellion. Jack Cade again getting the men of Kent to rise up. They march on London in order to remove the evil advisors to King Henry VI. Whenever rebellions happen in the Middle Ages, it's never against the king, it's always against their advisors. Cade and his men stable their horses in Southwark. That's where all the inns are, fewer of them in the city of London. The drawbridge is raised against them so that they can't get in, but Cade and a party row to the drawbridge, overpower the guards, cut the ropes on the drawbridge so it can't be lifted up, and ride into the city, where they lynch a couple of the king's advisors, go back to Southwark for the night. While this has been going on, the City of London has raised some forces. They go down to the bridge, they close the stone gate in the middle of the night. Cade's forces realize what's happening. There is a battle on the bridge for the control of that great stone gate for 8 hours or more. In the end, the City of London triumphs. The rebels are driven off. Cade is ultimately captured and dies of his wounds before he can be executed. The gate and the drawbridge also feature in rebellions, Fauconberg's rebellion, Wyatt's rebellion in the 1500s. When the Spanish Armada is sailing in 1588, those gates are closed again and defences are prepared. So you have the bridge not just as communication, but also as a way of blocking access from the south, defending access by the road, defending the river from forces sailing up it. There are better things that happen there as well. One of the most dramatic being the parade for the Restoration in 1660, when Charles II rides into London, but it had been used before this, decked out and decorated. The Black Prince in 1357, when he rides after the Battle of Crécy over Battle of Poitiers, over the bridge, bringing the prisoners that he's kept. Banners are unfurled, crowds appear. In 1395, for Richard II's wedding, again more decorations. The biggest ones perhaps in 1415 after Agincourt, where there are 2 huge statues carved that stand by the stone gates, probably or possibly of Gog and Magog, the giants that are said to protect the City of London. These things are said to have been carved so that they were bigger than the towers, 60 feet high. There is another procession, a grimmer one, after Henry V's death. Royal brides are frequently met on the bridge by the Lord Mayor of London and conducted with great ceremony and procession across it. But the description of Charles II's procession sort of knocks most of that into a cocked hat. It's said that tapestries were draped over all of the buildings. There were giant decorations. They got all the repairs done in time. And on 29th of May, which was Charles II's 30th birthday, the procession from the Lord Mayor crossed the bridge to meet Charles at St. George's Fields, just south of the river. And then this massive, great parade went across. 300 gentlemen in cloth of silver, 300 men in purple coats, then the troops marching, then 700 horsemen, 72 sheriffsmen, men of the City of London, the city livery companies, all wanting to be associated with the return of the king as he came across the river. Just that thing on the repairs to the bridge being done, not sure how good they were, because a few years later, Samuel Pepys reports that he was walking over the bridge and fell down a hole, probably close to where the drawbridge is, and needed helping out. He could see the river underneath as his leg plunged through the boards. So sometimes the bridge is not being maintained and kept up to the standards we expect. The responsibility of this was given to something called Bridge House. They have a royal charter from 1282. The City of London gets jurisdiction of the bridge. I think I said 1282 before. It's 1258. 1282 is Bridge House. This is getting income from rents on the bridge, rents from land given to them within the City of London. There was a big bit of land close to where Mansion House is in the stocks market. It was regarded as a religious duty to leave money to churches and to the upkeep of bridges. Bridges have always had this religious connotations as well. So there are donations of money, donations of land. This is going to the control of two people called the bridge masters. They have something called Bridge House on the south side of the river, and at various times a large staff, carpenters, masons, rent collectors. At one point there was even a keeper of the swans. The swans that went through it belonged to the city, and at one point as well, keeper of the heads that were stuck on the bridges, on the towers over those bridges. The bridge house also had to give money to the city at various times. It was part funded the building of Guildhall in the early 1400s after the earlier building had been destroyed and that needed to be rebuilt. At times it had to borrow money off the city, but over the centuries it has acquired a fund that it now tops more than £1.5 billion. It is a charity. It is still responsible for the upkeep of the bridges within the City of London, but it has also got it changed its rules about 15, 20 years ago, so it could give money to causes that weren't just bridge related, and it gives out 50 or 60 million pounds a year, both to the upkeep of the bridges and in charitable donations. No longer called Bridge House. Forgotten completely what it is called. It will come back to me, but probably not in the right time. This is the bridge in the 1540s. We can see heads here on the drawbridge tower. The drawbridge had stopped being used by this point. The lifting and the closing of the drawbridge was doing severe damage to the bridge, so it was decreed in the 1480s that the bridge should not be lifted anymore, except in defence and except in exceptional circumstances. So it was lifted a couple of times for Henry VII, but after that, not at all. We have got the great stone gate here on this side. This is a replacement. The earlier one had collapsed into the river in the end of the 1300s, blocking one of one of these arches until the new bridge is built. Bridge House, ever on this side of the river, we can still see the houses, some of which are spanning the bridge completely. One of the other consequences of the bridge acting as a dam is that upriver becomes very slow moving. And this has the consequence in very, very cold weather that the Thames might freeze. Sometimes the frosts, as they called it, are so great that the entire river freezes. There's tales of it freezing all the way down to Woolwich at one point. But it is more likely that it freezes above the bridge. And these give rise to some of the most famous of the instances that surround the bridge, the so-called frost fairs, when the ice is so strong that events can take place on the river. This, I believe, over the left is Temple Stairs. You've got the bridge in the background. The most famous of these, perhaps, or the biggest of these, was in the winter of 1685 to 4, when it was said there was a street of booths that stretched from Temple to Southwark. People trading, people selling. There was bull baiting, horse and coach races across the ice. You can see people ice skating, puppet plays, cooks and tippling, and lewder pursuits taking place on the river. These continue all the way up until the winter of 1813-14. That is the last frost fair to be held, the last before the bridge is replaced. They are big events, big commercial events, but the freezing of the river has other consequences. That ice damages the piers, damages the starlings, and in thaws, even more damage is done. Great ice flows flow down the river and crash into the structure of the building. At one point in 1281, 5 of the piers are destroyed by the ice flowing down and smashing into them. So you have got these wonderful events taking place, but I suspect the bridge masters are looking anxiously, waiting to see what damage is going to be caused afterwards. The bridge is in this constant state of repair. It is the piers, the starlings are being replaced, the buildings are being done upon it. There is a new drawbridge tower built in 1426. The Great Stone Gate, as I mentioned before, actually it's 1437 that collapsed into the river and needed replacing. By the time we get to 1616, the drawbridge tower has gone completely, and you've got something that's called Nonsuch House. I'll look at that in just a second. And the Great Stone Gate has become the repository for those heads, the keeper of the heads. When heads were first displayed on the river, and we think the first one was William Wallace, Braveheart, in about 1300, they went on the drawbridge. That was the major tower, the bigger tower on the bridge. After the drawbridge tower goes, they move down to the Great Stone Gate, and a visitor to London in the late 1500s records there being upwards of 32 heads stuck there on spikes on the river. The keeper of the heads' responsibility to make sure they didn't rot too quickly, and once they were past their best, perhaps we can say, he would throw them in the river to sink to the bottom. So prisoners executed at the Tower of London, beheadings on Tower Hill, the heads of traitors would be displayed on the bridge. This is also the place where the death warrant of Mary, Queen of Scots, was read out, announced to the crowds. So a brutal entrance when you went through the river. The last head to be displayed there was in 1678. After that, the heads were displayed over Wren's rather lovely Temple Bar in Fleet Street. So the tradition continued, but it moved from the bridge in this point. Nonsuch House, this huge Elizabethan mansion that it looked like, replaced the drawbridge tower, as I say. This was 75 feet wide, so that's what, 22 meters. 25 feet, so about 8 meters deep. It's actually two houses split down the middle, which were occupied by the better sort, and a classical facade, which was painted. A glorious looking building during its construction during the rest of the 16th and early 17th century. But by the middle of the 17th century, it was starting to look a little bit the worse for wear. The bridge continues to suffer from collapses, breakages, fires. There are fires in Southwark on numerous occasions. There is a big fire at one end of the bridge, at the north end of the bridge, in 1633. About a third of the houses are destroyed, and Holler's vista here shows it, 15 years after that, before the rebuilding has started again. In fact, there are wooden parapets set up so that people crossing the bridge aren't going to be blown off the bridge in storms. There is Nonsuch House again. The stone gate is down here. This is the House of Windows, I believe. Is that what it was called? That was another glorious house at one end of the bridge. So fire at one end of the bridge. The houses are being rebuilt, and then 1633, so less than 20 years after Holler, we have the Great Fire of London. 80% of the city of London destroyed. That breaks out. There is St. Magnus's Church as it existed before the Great Fire. The Great Fire breaks out. Pudding Lane is sort of around here somewhere. St. Magnus's Church is one of the first to go. The bridge fire is fire on the bridge, but a break caused by the rebuilding, a break caused up towards the chapel, means that only about a third of the superstructure of the bridge is damaged, even though the heat of the flames do a lot of damage to the arches and to the piers. And the bridge is not something that people can escape over. There are burning beams, there are fallen houses within it, but as an entirety, the bridge manages to survive. At the other end of the bridge, 1676, there is another fire in Southwark, another one again in 1725, which damages the Great Stone Gate. That needs replacing. That Great Stone Gate taken down slightly later, when the bridge, it is decided that the bridge is becoming anachronistic. This is a illustration, a drawing by Rowlandson, later, 1787, giving a hint of the chaos that took place on the bridge when it was emptied of buildings. So imagine what it was like when it was full of buildings. This is the overdrove ox. This ox has escaped and is terrifying the coaches and the people crossing the bridge. Most commentators or reports of the bridge just tell you about how noisy it was, how crowded it was. Shouts, cries, screams, the noise of the rushing water underneath the bridge. There were water wheels at the St. Magnus end. There were corn mills at the water-powered corn mills at the Southwark end. A great din as you went across, amplified, of course, by these buildings over it. Animals being herded, carts trying to get across this huge press of people. In 1675, it was decided that everyone should try and stick to the right. There were beadles appointed to try and maintain that. And when the bridge was cleared, and I'll come to that, cleared of the houses, oh, sorry, in fact, before that, in 1722, they changed their mind and decided that everyone should stick to the left. This is apparently one of the reasons why the British drive on the left rather than the right. Well, certainly that's what legend tells us because of this decree. And yet it could still take an hour to cross the bridge. By the time we get to the 1700s, the bridge is becoming anachronistic. The shops on the bridge in the Middle Ages, they'd been very upmarket. It is where you came to shop if you needed specific things, important things. By the time you get to the 1700s, there have been other markets, other shopping streets developed. It is less desirable. The retailers on the bridge are less upscale than other parts of London. So it is not being visited in the same way by the quality. The houses being replaced, they now look more Georgian, or certainly early Georgian and uniform. You can also see though that as they've got bigger, as they've got wider, they've needed to build a sort of platform on which these houses could stand, and that is reducing the height of the arches. So it's making it even more difficult for boats to go upriver. They can only really go through the bridge at low tide. So you're saying that the waters are only navigable up and down river for maybe 4-6 hours a day. Other bridges are being built. Putney first in 1729. Then you've got Westminster Bridge, the City of London, the traders, the rivermen all fought this. That opens in 1750. It is much wider. It is much more open. Blackfriars Bridge, just upriver, opens in 1769. The purpose, the point of London Bridge is being lost. The city decides it needs to act. 1749, before Westminster, before Blackfriars, there is a 3-hour gridlock on the bridge when crowds have gone to Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens to listen to a rehearsal for the music for the Royal Fireworks. And the flow of people trying to get back over the bridge into the city is so great that traffic stops completely for 3 hours. There is more damage done in thaws in the 1730s. The bridge is gradually becoming second rate. So the City of London thinks it has to act. There are parliamentary committees, there are competitions for new bridges, plans are drawn up, but all of these are deemed a little bit too expensive. So their plan is to strip the houses from the bridge. So the leases are coming, most of them coming towards the end. Those that aren't are gotten rid of. That allows them to widen the roadway. Just as they're building it, as they're doing this, they know it's going to take time to strip the properties. So there is a temporary wooden bridge set up alongside it. And in 1758, this is destroyed by a fire, completely destroyed. The river is impassable for weeks because the old London Bridge, the stone bridge, is busy being remade, remodeled, and is blocked. the temporary bridge that was acting as the conduit over the river is completely destroyed by fire. Witnesses report that the fire started in 2 places at once, so it is suspected that it is sabotage rather than accident. But the stone bridge is cleared, and eventually it is completely cleared. It is completely cleared of buildings. 2 arches in the centre are knocked together to make the Great Arch. The Great Stone Gate is taken down in 1760, and all the houses have gone by 1762. It has taken 4 years to clear all the structures from the bridge. Structures that I suppose you can say went back 550 years. It gives us a slightly more elegant bridge, finished in the Gothic taste, it is said. There are recesses for pedestrians to shelter, and some of those are covered in little half domes for pedestrians to shelter from the rain and the elements. Balustrades, stone balustrades that go along it. There are posts and chains within it to separate the walkways from the road, the general road surface that goes through. You can see on this one the water wheels that are still there on the north side of the bridge, but it doesn't really fix the problem. By 1801, it's obvious that this really hasn't solved anything. More bridges are springing up. Vauxhall 1816, Waterloo in 1817, designed by John Rennie. That's said to have been able to take 4 carriages going across it side by side, so almost twice the width of London Bridge. Southwark Bridge, an iron bridge built in 1819, just upstream from this London Bridge. So it is regarded as necessary to get rid of the old bridge. There is an act in 1823, an act for the rebuilding of London Bridge, and the first piles to build these what are called cofferdams. Cofferdams, the water is pumped out, then you can build your new stone pier, these stone piers that are being built. The first piles for those are put in March of 1824. There is a great ceremony in one of these cofferdams in June 1825, the 10th anniversary of the Battle of Waterloo, where the 400 people go down steps surrounded by this dam to see the Lord Mayor of London tap in the first granite stone, the first stone of the first pier that will construct London Bridge. The bridge is built just 100 feet or so upriver of the old one. So here is the old one still in use. As the new one is constructed next to it, this is still the line of the modern bridge. The line of the old bridge passes, as I say, up in front of St. Magnus the Martyr, and then past the monument to the Great Fire of London. The monument is where it is precisely because you passed it after crossing the bridge. The first thing you saw after the church was the monument to the Great Fire. But here is Rennie's Bridge being built. It's a classic little bit of British engineering. It's 18 months late in being opened, but it's opened by William IV and Queen Adelaide on the 1st of August, 1831. There is a procession up the river with royal barges. The royal party lands just the other side on what are now called, or what were called, Adelaide Steps. In the early 1900s, a building was built there called Adelaide House, named after the stairs, which are named after the Queen. They even had someone with a hot air balloon as part of these huge, great celebrations that took place. The bridge is 928 feet long, so a little bit shorter than the one it replaced. 17 meters wide, so 50, 55, 60 feet wide. The bridge has its revenge on the river, on the boatmen, on the other bridges that have been stealing its lunch. The improved flow means that the tides are 3 foot higher. They're also 18 inches lower, and there were ships that grounded because the tides were lower. A faster flow that didn't just mean that the frost fairs couldn't happen anymore. It means that the scouring from the debris within the rivers on the foundations of other bridges upriver meant that they eventually needed replacing. Blackfriars Bridge needs replacing. Waterloo Bridge is replaced because of the faster flow brought about by the new bridge. By the middle of the 1800s, cracks are already appearing on the bridge. The seaside, the east side, has settled several feet, but they do a survey and say that it's completely sound. But the bridge needs widening. So in 1902, it's widened. Basically, what they do is they take the space that's there on the stairs and push it out on either side to try and cope with the extra traffic going over. But by the 1960s, there are 3,000 cars an hour going over the bridge. It is known to be past its sell-by date. And then we get the new one, which ingeniously is constructed while the new bridge is being taken down in the center. First of all, one of these box junctions built, box frames built either side of the bridge, so traffic can continue moving. They then took down the middle bit of the bridge and then put in the extra 2 sections that needed to complete the bridge to give us what we have now. As I say, sort of 75% wider. Opened by the Queen in 1973, cost £4.5 million in their money at the time. I'm not sure what that corresponds to now, probably 30 or 40 million. There was provision built in for if the pedestrian traffic increased to actually build an elevated walkway along the central or over the central reservation between it. That never happened. There was also plans when it was originally put through that the bridge would be heated so it would never ice over. They didn't have enough money for that, so that never took place either. And that's what we've got now. There are a couple of survivals of older bridges. One of those sort of covered parapets from the 1760s bridge, when the old London Bridge was stripped of its buildings and the walkways put in and the covers. There's one in Victoria Park. This one is in Guy's Hospital, where it fetched up after that bridge was demolished. If you go near Southwark Cathedral, this is still the bit of Rennie's Bridge, that 1830s bridge. So the new bridge uses that at the Southwark end. It used to use it as well at the other end until Lower Thames Street was widened in the 1960s, and that disappeared. 1960s, 1970s, and that disappeared as well. The main survival, of course, is the fact, the glorious fact that an entrepreneur called Robert McCulloch bought the old London Bridge for $2.5 million. Didn't transport it all, but he was building a new town by Lake Havasu in Arizona, and he thought this would be the perfect centerpiece, talking point. He was a born salesman. So the Stones were numbered, the cladding was numbered, shipped over to the US, and they clad a steel framework underneath it. There was an act of Congress so that the river could be diverted to go under the bridge. And the opening ceremony, attended by the Lord Mayor of London, bagpipers, hot air balloons, an echo back to the 1830s. And it still stands there in the desert or in Arizona. And if I click through here, hopefully this will take us through live. Oh no, it's not going to work. Oh no, there we are. There we are. That is Lake Havasu now, 64 Fahrenheit, 18 Celsius. There we are. That is Old London Bridge, still there. It seems like a fairly ridiculous thing to do, but what other London bridges can you name in the world? You know, why would we be talking about Lake Havasu? Why would I be several thousand miles away looking at a webcam of a bridge if London Bridge didn't still exist? And I actually think it's absolutely glorious that he did it. It's preserved there for us. So I have been talking too long. Finally, next week's will be shorter. We'll be doing an online series, Southwark. Still get tickets at stuffaboutLondon.co.uk. I'll keep next week's down to an hour, but just to the final coda, the story London Bridge is falling down. It has been said, I mean, this is evidence of it going back to the 17th century, although it's not really written down until the 18th century. The melody is, we think it was sung to one melody before. The melody that we know now is the one that is sung around the world. Some stories say that it was due to Eleanor of Provence, the wife of Henry III, who was given the revenues from the bridge in the 1200s, and the bridge decayed because of that. Another story says that it is Queen Matilda, or Maud, who was married to Henry I, who built bridges over the Lee rather than London Bridge itself. Some sources say it's the Virgin Mary. Others say it takes us all the way back to King Olaf, Saint Olaf, that destruction of the bridge from the Heimskringla in 1014. And that's where a lot of the tales. There's a rather wonderful book on Old London Bridge, and even that wonderful book quotes a early 1800s translation of the Heimskringla after the bridge has been destroyed, which goes: London Bridge is broken down, gold is won and bright renown, shields resounding, war horns sounding. And that seems, well, you know, there seems to be the evidence. It seems to be proof positive that this is where the rhyme comes from. Unfortunately, it's a back projection. Earlier translations of the Scandic verse are nothing like that. It is the translator from the early 1800s who has decided to fit a very loose translation into the meter. Apparently, if we translate the Anglo-Saxon into strictly, it starts: "And further, O prover of the serpent of Ig storms, valiant in war, you broke down London's bridge," which doesn't sound anything like the poem itself. So it seems to be just a folk song common to Europe. There are similar songs, similar routines where you go through and the last person is captured in the dance in Germany, in France, and in other parts of Europe. It is just that because London Bridge is such a famous bridge, the stories of it are so great, the fame of it spread so wide, and the dramas of it were so immense that the song has become so associated with that, and we want to associate it with a particular bit of history rather than just accept that it is a folk song that has been adapted to the bridge. So